All right, so let's get started with these positional previews for the Indianapolis Colts headed into training camp. We have 4 straight days of position previews coming to you leading up to Colts camp on July 23rd, and we might as well start with the most popular, with what is likely to be not only one of the bigger stories for the Indianapolis Colts, but kind of one of the bigger stories for the NFL at large when you talk about at least preseason stories. And that's this quarterback position. And as a team, when your quarterback competition is the biggest story for you headed into a season, the result is really twofold. Number one, you have a whole lot of reasons to be invested in training camp and preseason, which in some ways is kind of a good thing for a guy like me who just loves football so much. Life is so much better during football season. If I have a reason to be heavily invested a little bit earlier than the start of the regular season, I'm going to take it. But then, too, unfortunately, when the quarterback position is this big of a story, particularly a competition between two guys, you do end up a bit nervous for the season ahead, right? Because there aren't very many great teams that aren't sure who their quarterback is going to be week 1 at this juncture. Now, one thing that I feel is very clear about the position for the Colts headed into this upcoming season is that Shane Steichen and company are prioritizing mobility at that position. And when I say that, I mean having a guy that can run, whether it's Richardson, Daniel Jones, Riley Leonard, Jason Bean, all these guys can run. At worst, they do it at an above average level. And at their best, particularly in the case of Anthony Richardson, they run at an elite level. Now, right off the bat, I have plenty of thoughts on that and that alone, because once upon a time, I wasn't all that confident as to whether or not Shane Steichen truly had a preference at the quarterback position in terms of a skill set, right? Whether a guy can run or not. Because you look at his history as a coach and you do look at the guys he worked with and say, well, there's kind of a balance at just about every level of the spectrum. Like you had a guy like Phillip Rivers was really where he kind of grinded his teeth and got started at the quarterback position was with him. And Rivers can run no better than me. Right? Like, I mean, and I'll tell you right now, if I run a 6-second 40, that would be a good day for me, right? Like Rivers couldn't run worth a damn. And then you had a guy in Justin Herbert who was kind of in the middle of the spectrum, is definitely mobile by the standards of really most generations of quarterback in this league. But you look at him now and say, all right, that's not a running quarterback, but that's a guy who can run. And then you have the complete end of the spectrum, which was Jalen Hurts when Shane Steichen was in Philly. And obviously we know how great he is as a runner, so good that the league and many teams in the league want to play band because of how capable Jalen Hurts is, particularly at running that play. But neither here nor there. Between those facts and really now, the fact that we have seen Anthony Richardson get drafted by Shane Steichen and Riley Leonard get drafted by Shane Steichen, both of whom have mobility as a strength of their game, plus the acquisition of Daniel Jones, it seems to me like now we do have a pretty good idea that Shane Steichen's ideal skill set for a quarterback does include a fair bit of mobility. Now, I'm not entirely sure if I value mobility at the position as much as the next person. Like, listen, call me old school, but I believe the job of the quarterback in the NFL is to throw to people more talented than he is with the ball in his hands. Like, above all else, you need to be able to facilitate the rock if you're a quarterback in this league. And of course, the Colts brass knows this. I'm not claiming that they don't, but you do wonder sometimes if teams, and when I say teams, in this case, I kind of mean the Colts, if teams are getting a bit too enamored with the idea of talent and upside at the quarterback position, as opposed to just looking at a guy and saying, traditionally, this is what makes a good quarterback in the league, right? Like the Richardson experiment has certainly been a case study in this very thing, not the only one, right? Like you can't deny the facts of the NFL. You look at this league right now and you look at the great quarterbacks in it. Guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts as mentioned, Mahomes, maybe not on the level of those guys as runners, but certainly Mahomes is pretty slick with the feet, if you will. Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, kind of guys in the same mold as a Patrick Mahomes in that regard. And Jaden Daniels, we know the season that he just had. The list goes on and on. Listen, there's a lot of guys right now in this league that are doing it at a very high level that get it done on the ground, in some cases just as good as they get it done through the air. But just because that is the case does not mean it has to be the case. And that's sort of where I stand. Like, Peyton Manning was on Pat McAfee's show recently and spoke to Pat about this idea of quarterbacks being able to execute from the pocket first and foremost before anything else. I believe the topic was Arch Manning, and Pat was bringing up this idea where it's like, all right, you have the legs of Arch of the Saints, not young Arch, but Archie Manning, but then you sort of get kind of like the cerebral with the arm that you had in Eli and Peyton, right? And Peyton was saying, hey, listen, the legs are nice, man, but at the same time, you got to be able to execute from the pocket above all else. And it seems obvious to say that should be the case, but it does sort of seem like a lost art in some capacity in the league right now, or at least, let me rephrase that, it seems to not stand alone any longer at the top of what teams are kind of, I don't know, having as their check marks when they're evaluating quarterbacks and their potential to produce at a high level in this league. And that's around where I'm not sure I'm in line with the direction of some of the great minds in this league and where the league is headed. I mean, a guy like Tom Brady was playing at an elite level all the way until the end. And you think guys like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, if you took them from where they were and plugged them into the league today in 2025, you don't think they would be able to have the same amount of success that they did then, especially with how much friendlier the rules are for the offense and the quarterback today than they were during that time? If you think those guys wouldn't survive in today's NFL, you've completely lost the plot, if you ask me, because the guys I brought up kind of as the elite guys in this league, all of them can run, sure, but the commonality is that they can get it done from the pocket. Guys like Burrow, Mahomes, if you got rid of their legs, they would still be elite quarterbacks in this league. Now, the reason to bring this up, because I know I'm sort of talking in circles about the quarterback position as a whole, but I do think it's important for you to understand, right? One, again, I think in a football sense, it's important that we as fans understand that concept. But two, to bring it back to the Indianapolis Colts, the reason I even say all of this is because it does play into my thoughts on the Colts quarterback position. And I do need you to understand the lens that I am viewing it from before sharing my thoughts. So today, we are, of course, going to talk. If you have not figured it out already, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, we're going to talk about the full picture of the quarterback position for this team, how things may look with Richardson versus with Jones, and kind of what you're hoping for from each guy. And then once we have that out of the way, I will give some predictions, not just with them, but we'll touch on the third string quarterback battle for the Indianapolis Colts as well. You really have competition at all tiers of the bracket for the Indianapolis Colts right now at quarterback. But before we do all that, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're on our way to 4,000 by the start of the season. We're pretty close. We're pretty not close. Got to both things at the same time. I think we're right at that 3,500 level. So if you keep coming back, enjoying the content, or perhaps today's your first day here and you're getting excited for the season, click that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you a thing. We'll make sure you never miss an episode again. Audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the product that we are putting out over here. But most importantly, if you plan to engage in the comments section on YouTube, be civil with one another. We're all rooting for the Colts. And just because you disagree with someone, I mean, it's just football. Like, it's just sports. Sure, I take it seriously, but we're out here having fun, right? Take it as an opportunity to simply facilitate discussion, share your point of view, listen to their point of view. And if you disagree, you disagree. But again, we want to be nice to one another around here, but neither here nor there. That's the housekeeping. Let's get back to the quarterback battle. And one of the big things that has defined how we're viewing the quarterback battle up to this point, right? The big thing we heard from Shane Steichen about how he's going to go about making his decision as to who's going to start for the Indianapolis Colts, I believe the quote was something along the lines of, it's going to come down to whoever is the most consistent. Now, with that said, you would have to imagine that consistency looks a little bit different for each of these guys. And when I say you'd have to imagine, that's my personal opinion. Like, that can't just be a one-to-one. For example, if you were to say whoever completes the most passes is going to be the most consistent guy in this battle, that may be pretty close to my definition of what I think consistency should look like at the quarterback position. But if that's what we were going off of, and that's what Shane Steichen was going off of, that and that alone, then, the battle would essentially already be over, right? Because Richardson has been below 50% completion for his career, as opposed to Daniel Jones, who's above 60%. And that gap likely is not going to entirely close over the course of one offseason. So that really, and that alone, tells me that's not the only thing that they are looking at in this quarterback battle. Like, sure, they're using the word consistency, but there's a lot hiding underneath that word, right? Like, that word is sort of this easy word to say for what I think is a bit more of a nuanced evaluation of the quarterback position. And I think lends itself to what I'm saying. Consistency is going to be getting judged on an individual basis. Like, what they're looking at for Richardson, not the same thing as to what they're looking at for Daniel Jones. So for Richardson, the term consistency likely means the following. Number one, of course, it's staying healthy, and we've already had a struggle with that before we even got to a single training camp practice. So we're going to see how that goes. But number two, in more of the football sense, I think making good decisions is going to be something that they're looking at for Richardson. Like, are you throwing it to the right guy on the play? Are you kind of understanding the fact that not every play needs to get you 10, 20, 30 yards, right? Like, right now in his career, he's at something along the lines of, I don't know, what is 11.4 yards per attempt or so. It's over 11 yards per attempt, which is fucking absurd if you want me to be 100% honest with you. Like, that is really, really high. Like, if you look across the league, that is a number that is historically, I'm not even sure if that's existed. Like, it's that high of a number for Richardson. And in my opinion, that number, if you're talking about a stat that shows the lack of maturity of Richardson as a passer, I think as a guy, like as a human being, I think he's a very mature guy, but I'm talking about his maturity as a passer in the NFL. I think that number really lends itself to a lack of it, right? And I'm not really mad about that per se, right? I mean, it's not that it's completely unforgivable that he wouldn't be a mature passer in the league. He came in as one of, if not the youngest starting quarterback in the history of the NFL. But he's going to have to take what's given to him more often. That's going to be a big thing that the Colts are looking at for Anthony Richardson. And then number three, which is an extension of this one, are you consistently throwing a catchable football? Like, sure, it's one thing to make the right decision. I saw plenty of times last year where Richardson, I saw him make the wrong decisions, but I also saw him make the right decisions and just miss the throw, right? Like, sure, a pass can be incomplete, right? Not all completions, though, are built the same. What you're going to be looking at for Richardson, what the Colts are going to be looking at for Richardson, is, are there layers to your ability to throw the football? Like, sure, we know you have a cannon. Sure, we know you could chuck that thing 75, fucking 80 yards if you really had to, right? Like, you could let that thing rip, but you don't always need to use that side of your arm. That's only one part of what makes a quarterback a good passer. It's the primary distinction between having a great arm, right? Having arm talent and being a good thrower of the football. Those are two different things. And up to this point, you just haven't seen a consistent ability from Anthony Richardson to kind of switch up the velocity and the trajectory of a throw based on what's needed in a given moment. In fact, I do think part of the struggles we've seen from him up to this point in the short game are part of him figuring out this side of throwing the football, or at least trying to in real time, even if it's just a crash course on the field. You don't need to hit the guy that's 5 yards away from you with the same zip that you need to hit a guy that's 20 yards away from you with, right? And I think he just really struggles with taking something off of a pass, right? Taking a little bit of the right? Taking some of that off of it while still being comfortable in his delivery, right? And that's one of the big things. You see the inconsistencies in the footwork. You wonder how much of that, and I don't know, I'm speculating, of course. I'm not an expert at the position, but you wonder how much of that has to do with, like, oh man, if I have to throw it a little bit lighter to the guy that's 5 yards away, do I just not feel confident in my ability to do that and then also have my feet in the right place? You don't know. But clearly he's trying to figure a lot of things out when it comes to throwing the football. That's what you're going to see with Richardson. I really think those three things that I just laid out would result in that consistency that the Colts are looking for Richardson. And if he can do those, even if it doesn't result in him completing more passes than Anthony Richardson, as long as he can do a little bit better than he did last year, you got to feel decent about his ability to go out there and give this roster a chance to win. Because even with all the flaws he's had up to this point in his career, the dude is 500 as a starter, okay? So the improvement, or if there is improvement rather, there's absolutely upside there. The roster is there, as it has been for a while now. But with Anthony Richardson, make no mistake, we are past the point of potential. It's not that he has to be a finished product this year, but that potential has to start showing up more often because you just can't have a guy out there, one, that you can't trust to stay on the field, but two, you go quarters at a time, really, with essentially, no first downs. I don't want to say there was none, right? Don't take me verbatim on that. But I mean, there would be large stretches of games for the Colts last year where they were not able to move the ball. And you can't have that for Anthony Richardson, right? You just cannot have that. Now, if we're to move on to Daniel Jones, consistency is going to look a little bit different, right? One, I think the biggest thing the Colts are going to look for out of Jones is an ability to push the ball down the field, or at least the idea of making the defense respect it, right? For example, I always like to bring UFC up because it's probably my second favorite sport, big UFC fan. When you're in a fight, one of the big things that you need to have for the opponent, you don't need to actually take them down, right? But you need to threaten the takedown. It's a huge thing in fighting. And if you could threaten the takedown, you loosen the defense up a little bit, or you loosen the other fighter up a little bit, right? A wrestler can outbox a boxer in UFC if he's able to simply threaten the takedown. It adds another element that a guy has to worry about. For Daniel Jones and the NFL as a quarterback, it's much the same. You're only going to get one, two, maybe three huge explosive chunk throws down the field, but you have to have the defense respect the fact that you're going to do that to open up the rest of the field for you, okay? Now, whether or not up to this point in his career, this has been an arm talent issue or just a confidence for Anthony Richardson, for Daniel Jones, I'm not entirely sure in terms of him getting the ball down the field. I tend to lean towards the latter, though. I mean, I've watched quite a bit of Daniel Jones being a New Yorker, right? I mean, I've seen much more of him on a Sunday at a bar than I am proud to admit. But Jones can really make every throw in the book, right? He has plenty of arm talent for the NFL, all the arm you would need to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Let me just put it that way. But after what he's been through up to this point in his career, how confident is he in his ability to make those throws down the field and actually complete them as opposed to turn it over? Like, that's going to be a direct indicator of his willingness to push the ball down the field, or rather a direct indicator of his confidence is going to be his willingness to push the ball down the field. Now, the problem with doing that when you're a guy like Daniel Jones is pushing the ball down the field is going to potentially lead to something else, or more of a risk of something else that has been a problem for you up to this point in your career, which is going to be a huge thing the Colts are looking for in terms of consistency, which are the turnovers or a lack thereof, right? The fumbles are something for Daniel Jones that have been a problem, okay? We're not going to know what that looks like in practice. We're going to have to wait for the games to see the fumbling issues pop up if they're going to pop up. But the interceptions are a big part of this thing too. And everyone is allowed to throw an interception, right? Like, we aren't mad at an interception. Interceptions are part of the game. Some of the great gunslingers, part of what you have to accept are the fact that they're going to throw some picks. Andrew Luck was huge on that when he was here. Like, sure, Luck would throw 35, 40 touchdowns, but you also had double-digit interceptions out of Andrew Luck. And we were all right with that. But the question is, how often does it happen? And when do they happen? And are they a result of a boneheaded decision or just a good football play, right? If he can limit the boneheaded interceptions, the ones that are clearly his fault, he can likely position himself as, if nothing else, the most stable option for the Indianapolis Colts at the quarterback position. And really confidence, right? If I'm to sum up that whole section, confidence for Daniel Jones is going to be big. Does he look like a guy who thinks he can lead this team to victories? I think that's going to be, you're going to try to be figuring that out if you're the Colts, the coaching staff in training camp. He's just been through so much. And when you're in your head at the quarterback position, it's a really bad place to be. Like it could just make you look like a much worse player than you are. Being decisive is so important at that position, particularly in the NFL, right? The windows are so small. The timing of a throw is so critical that even the slightest bit of indecision when you're about to throw that football can completely eliminate a big play. It could turn a 40-yard gain into an interception. I mean, the stakes are that high and the margin for error is that small. And Daniel Jones, I hope he knows, and I'm sure the Colts hope he knows this too, he's better than he thinks he is. He's better than you think he is. And the flip that he has to make, the switch that he has to flip in his head, I think is almost the complete opposite of Anthony Richardson. Like, I think Richardson thinks he's better than he is. I think he's too confident, right? Or at least has thought that up to this point. I think it's been part of his downfall. Daniel Jones, on the other hand, has lost his mojo, much like Austin Powers, if you remember the what a classic comedy series that is, by the way. If you like comedy movies and have not seen Austin Powers and that series for whatever, I mean, please, oh, behave. You know what I'm saying? But neither here nor there. He's lost his mojo. Hopefully, the change of scenery for Daniel Jones can do something for him. Much less pressure now for him to perform in Indianapolis than he had in New York. He's basically playing with house money in his career at this point, as opposed to preserving it like he was with the Giants. But even then, 24, 44, and 1 as a starter, that obviously is not going to cut it if you're Daniel Jones. So if you want my prediction for who's going to win the quarterback battle for the Colts, I'm assuming it's Anthony Richardson. If he's able to stay healthy headed into week 1 and looks better than he did last offseason, because it wasn't pretty for Anthony Richardson in camp in hindsight. At the time, my lion eyes told me it was the defense being better than we thought. No. It was Richardson. Richardson was not ready going into last year for whatever reason that was. I mean, you even think back to remember there was that story about when they practiced the Bengals and those players were chirping him. Well, they were onto something. We should have listened to the Bengals defenders, who, by the way, their coach is now our defensive coordinator, but that's a discussion for a different day. Assuming Richardson is able to look better than he did last year in camp, I think he gets the nod headed into week 1. But make no mistake, if the Colts happen to see direct evidence from Anthony Richardson that this is going to be the same exact thing they just experienced all over again, and that's both on the practice field and behind the scenes in the film room and his habits off the field, then they will go with Daniel Jones. They're not scared to do that. I promise you, they will do that. Shane Steichen is looking to keep his credibility here, and he is not going to sacrifice his credibility for a guy that ultimately he doesn't think can be the answer going forward. But I do think that Anthony Richardson, at least in the preseason aspect of things, training camp and all that stuff, is going to show up in a way for the Indianapolis Colts that gives them enough reason to give him the nod to go out in week 1 and let him sink or swim. And they will absolutely let him sink if they have to, and then move on to Jones during the season, ultimately setting them up for an offseason next year with what is considered to be a very good quarterback draft class on a stack roster that's a QB away, a roster that we hope that we have a quarterback on right now. And more specifically than that, we hope that quarterback is Richardson. But shit, at this juncture, as a fan, I'll take it however I can get it. No Diddy on that, by the way. No Diddy at all. But yeah, so that's kind of the overview for the starters, and we'll see. I mean, obviously, that's what everyone's going to be watching. But now for the third string battle, there isn't so much to talk about. I guess there could be a lot to talk about here if we really wanted to. But ultimately, it is what it is, right? This is going to be the backup to one of Richardson or Jones. But I will say this. You have to assume that the hope right now for the organization is that Riley Leonard wins this thing over Jason Bean, right? Because if not, there would really have been no real reason to draft him. Like, if you didn't think you could do better than Ellinger and Bean at quarterback on the third string level, and you didn't think that guy was Leonard, like, do you get my point? The only reason to draft Leonard would be for him to be your third string quarterback. Obviously, the college pedigree for him, impressive. Notre Dame, national title, the whole bit. Do I see a guy that projects to be a big-time pro quarterback? Not technically. I'm not sure I see the arm talent of a guy that can make every throw in the book. And I also see a guy that's not even 220, 225 pounds that to some degree was relying on his physicality as a runner in college. I'm not sure that translates to the league either. Now, the good news is he was not drafted to be a starter for the Indianapolis Colts. He was not drafted to be a star. He can grow into whatever it is that he's going to grow into, and I think ultimately that's what they have him there for. Is that potentially a starter down the line? Sure, it can be. Why not, right? After all, Notre Dame, 6th-round pick. Well, you had Joe Montana went to Notre Dame, and Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick. So, Riley Leonard might be the GOAT, okay? He might be the GOAT. We don't know. But make no mistake, what he is right now is a project quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. They hope grows into a solid backup for them for years to come. Anyone thinking that it's anything other than that is understandably so. By the way, we have suffered at the quarterback position. But anyone who thinks Riley Leonard's going to be anything more than that, particularly this season, is simply a depraved and desperate Colts fan, desperate to call anyone their franchise quarterback. And if it means putting pressure on a 6th-round rookie quarterback, they'll do it. I mean, it just is what it is, like a junkie looking for their next fix, right? That is what Colts fans are at the quarterback position. But that right there was the quarterback preview for the Indianapolis Colts headed into camp, which is coming up this week. I mean, football is fucking back. It's back, baby. and we are going to be talking about the Colts every step of the way, motherfucker. But until next time, my name was Justin. This right here will always be, well, maybe not always, who knows, maybe one day it's not, the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. But as always, go Colts.